Hello and welcome to our Teaching for Success Inclusive podcast series. I'm your host, Rosa Kemerembe. Today we are talking about the digital divide in Uganda. The Ministry of Education just launched a shiny new plan, the Digital Agenda Strategy 2025 to 2032. 7 years to guide technology integration in our schools. But here's the uncomfortable question I want to sit with today. Who is this strategy actually for? Because when we look at the numbers, there is one digital device for every 63 students in Uganda. A third of schools with no internet at all. So it is painfully clear that rural schools are being left out. Is this deliberate or not? Let's get into it. The national averages are bad enough. One device for 63 learners. Only a quarter of schools are ICT ready. But averages lie, because when you say national average, you're hiding the fact that some schools have computer labs and Wi-Fi and others literally have nothing. So let me be specific. In urban and peri-urban schools, especially private schools and a few government seed schools, you might find a functional lab, a donated set of laptops, or maybe even a projector. That's not the norm, but it does exist. But in rural Uganda, in the majority of government primary schools, in the east, north, west, and parts of central that are off the tarmac, those schools are invisible to the digital agenda. Not because the children are less capable, not because the teachers are unwilling, but because the strategy was not written with them in mind. Let me paint you a picture of what lack of inclusion really looks like. A rural primary school, maybe in Karamoja, maybe in Kasese, maybe in Buyende, no electricity grid connection. Maybe a small solar panel on the head teacher in the head teacher's office, or if the NGO came last year, maybe you'll have that. No computer lab, no internet. The only digital service in the entire school, the head teacher's personal smartphone. If it's charged, that is. If there's network coverage. So now the ministry says, we will guide tech integration. But what integration? The children have never seen a laptop. Some have never seen a mouse. The teachers have never even been trained on how to use technology as a doorway to instruction. Some, but not all. Because there is no device for them to practice on. And here's the cruel part. These same rural schools are expected to implement the same curriculum, take the same national exams, and produce the same outcomes as schools with digital access. Is that fair? No. Is that inclusive? No. That is not a level playing field. That is institutionalized exclusion. We cannot talk about digital inclusion without talking about teachers, especially rural teachers. Most primary school teachers in rural areas have never received formal ICT training. And I know that some people say they have, but I am telling you they have not. Not because they don't want it, but because the training budget is so tiny. Never mind training budget. The budget that goes towards education in the country is extremely small. And when it exists, it happens in district headquarters, which might be about 40 kilometers round trip on a bad road with no transportation allowance. So even if a rural school somehow receives donated tablets or laptops, the teacher cannot use them effectively. They don't know how to troubleshoot if something goes wrong with them. They don't know how to find offline education content. They don't know how to integrate a device into a lesson without losing control of a crowded classroom. Okay? They don't have a projector. If you have 200 students, how do you use technology and project that information if you don't have a projector? The digital agenda strategy talks about teacher professional development, but without a budget for rural specific hands-on ongoing training and without devices in the schools to train on, those are just empty words. And let's not forget, rural teachers are already overworked, underpaid, and often handling multi-grade classes. Adding, figure out this tablet with no support is not empowerment, it's just a burden. Lack of inclusion isn't just about children learning to type. It's about the entire school system breaking down. Think about school data, attendance records, students' performance, transfer letters. In rural schools, almost all of this is still done on paper, handwritten, stored in a metal box or a shelf in files, in cardboard files. If the box gets wet, the records are gone. If the teacher transfers, the data often disappears. Now imagine a school with even basic digital tools, a cheap tablet, a simple offline app. You could track daily attendance. You could flag a child who has missed 2 weeks before they drop out. You could collect timely assessment data without carrying a pile of exercise books to the district. But rural schools don't have that. They just remain invisible to the education management information system. The ministry doesn't know which children are present, which are learning, which are falling behind, because the digital infrastructure to collect that data simply does not exist in the places that it is needed most, which is the rural areas. So, here is the central contradiction. The ministry launches a 7-year digital agenda strategy. Wow, it sounds so grand. But the education budget for 2025-2026 was cut by billions of shillings. Funding for primary education, especially in rural areas, is shrinking. It's not growing. You cannot roll out a national tech strategy with less than 7% of the national budget going to education. You certainly cannot reach rural schools when even basic needs like desks, latrines, classrooms are underfunded. Inclusion requires investment, not just a document, not just policies that are not implemented or they're only implemented in some schools or just the city schools or very few rural schools. It's not just a launch event. Real ring-fenced money for rural connectivity, rural devices, rural teacher training, and ongoing technical support is what we need. Without that, the digital agenda it's not a strategy. It's a press release for urban schools. Let me be constructive for a moment. What would genuine inclusion for rural schools actually require? First, a rural first device distribution policy. Not one per school, one per classroom at the very minimum. And devices that work offline with pre-loaded curriculum content in local languages. Secondly, solar-powered charging stations and battery banks. You cannot ask a rural school with no grid to run laptops on hope. Third, a dedicated rural teacher ICT training program held at the sub-county level with transport, meal allowances repeated every term, not once a year or once every few years. Fourth, simple offline digital tools for school management like attendance, records assessment, so that rural schools can actually send data to the district without needing the internet. Fifth, ongoing maintenance. and technical support, not a one-off donation, a system where a broken tablet or a broken laptop is fixed or replaced within a few days, not weeks, not months, not years. So, none of this is impossible. It's expensive, yes, but we need to invest in our education. But it's possible to get all of this in place. The question is not, can we afford it? The question is, do we value our rural children enough to fund them? So, let me end with this. The digital divide in Uganda is not primarily about technology. It is about inclusion. Who gets counted? Who gets trained? Who gets a chance to learn in a 21st century classroom? Right now, the Digital Agenda Strategy 2025 to 2032 looks like it was written for schools that already have electricity and already have trained teachers. That is not most schools. That is certainly not most rural schools. And until we admit that rural schools are being deliberately and negligently excluded, and until we fund their inclusion properly, the divide will only grow. This is Rosa Kemirembe reminding you that a national strategy that forgets rural children has failed before it has even begun.